You know, when the budget was presented, then we set this week for debate on various sectors of the budget.
Okay.
So when listening to the minority, you get the impression that they had left a better economy or they had managed the finances of this country better. And I was just drawing their attention to the fact that you know your performance by some key indicators. And I've always maintained that the purpose of governance is to maximize the welfare of your people. So let's look at the welfare matrices and see whether you have done well or not. But I always maintain that the greatest verdict on how you have managed the economy reflects in your electoral outcomes.
Okay.
So which is clear. And I told them that the electoral outcome suggests that they have 88 MPs out of 275 we have in the chamber right now. And then they had about 41.3% in terms of the presidential results. That is the biggest verdict you can place on your governance. Number two, when you do economic analysis on welfare, the critical welfare measure, I told Honorable Kojo Nkrumah that welfare GDP growth is not a welfare measure. You know why?
Why?
Because the drivers of the growth might not come from the productive sector. That will engineer the growth.
Let me try and understand something.
Good.
What you're trying to say is
yes,
that when a government touts
yes,
that it has posted X GDP growth,
yes,
it doesn't tell the full story.
It doesn't tell the full story.
And that what matters most is where the growth is coming from.
It's coming from.
Explain to me why.
So, for example, if you borrow so much and spend all in consumption, or you spend all your resources in debt servicing, debt servicing is an expenditure.
Yes.
It will be added to your GDP. But it is money that is going out, that is not to the people.
Oh.
So my point is that you may grow high, but if the drivers of those growth is not in the productive sector, that will not be reflected in the welfare of the people. So look at something. Ghana posted a GDP of 5.7% for last year.
Yes.
But the statistical service, this is the document.
Yes.
I thought you said something like Ghana 2024 statistical year overview.
Yesterday, and this is perhaps very important. Because yesterday, one of the newspapers reported that the Ghana Statistical Service, in fact, they were in Parliament.
Yes.
Professor Nim was in Parliament.
Yes, I was there.
What he suggested was that, you were there. Cool.
I was there. I asked the question.
Oh, you asked the question?
I asked him the question.
So did what the newspaper capture, which was that to state that the growth was induced by Galamsey is not entirely accurate.
So look at what
he said.
Look at what happened. I asked the statistician one simple question. I said, first of all, what was the end year GDP growth of 2024? He said 5.7% oil growth, and now oil growth at 6.3%. That's what he said.
Yes.
Then number two, I asked him, what was the drivers of those growth? Then number one, he said mining and quarry of 19.1% to service sector. And even the service sector, it was in the telcos. Not the welfare of the people, not productive sectors.
Right.
And then he talked about construction. And you and I know the level or the amount of money we spent in importing those drip machines contributed to the growth, but it did not resonate into uplifting the poverty level of our people. So my issue is never questioning the relevance of growth, because growth is also an indicative measure that we use, especially that assessing the health of the country in terms of the size of your envelope, whether it is enough to pay your debt. And it is one conversation that I want to raise further in terms of structural reforms to our how we measure our growth.
You mean the metrics?
The metrics. For example, I believe that one best way of measuring your debt accumulation level and whether the size of your revenue envelope is enough to pay your debt should not be the gross domestic product. It should rather be the net national product. You know why? Because most of the growth in GDP is attributable to expatriation. Repatriation of our, for example, the mining. We all know that Ghana has a royalty of 5% and a carried interest of 13.5%. So when you add all, it means that bulk of our oil reserves is not for this country, but it's added to our GDP. We have foreigners that do business in this country, and when they do their business, it is added to our GDP. These are not proper drivers of growth. So for me, I feel like the matrices or the basket that we use to determine our debt to GDP ratio should be revised to look for only Ghanaian contribution.
I get it. Because
that is what is owned by us and not the general envelope. So that's what I seek to draw. But I'm saying that every government wants to alleviate poverty. In fact, that's all what we've been doing. And it is reported by the IMF that incidence of poverty in 2024 was 24.3%.
Okay.
Virtually 25%. So if it is 25%, that's 4 Ghanaians. So 1 out of every 4 Ghanaians is poor.
Okay.
And they use a ceiling of 16 Ghana cedis. That is the exchange rate.
Yeah.
They are of the view that your baseline, if a day a Ghanaian cannot spend up to 16 Ghana cedis, that Ghanaian is poor.
Okay.
So you and I know how many Ghanaians do we have currently that can spend 16 Ghana cedis.
Okay.
So 1 out of every 4 Ghanaians is a poor person.
I see.
So you cannot have these welfare matrices performing bad, and yet you say you are superior managers to the economy. Like I was talking about the IMF conditionalities.
Yeah.
So one thing that is expected as part of the PCPEC program is strict adherence to structural benchmarks. And it is important that every country, for you to even qualify for the next tranche, that's why they do it in tranches. You must always meet certain structural benchmarks.
Sure.
And Dr. has started on a very good note because he said ever since the budget was read, the primary focus is on primary balance.
Okay.
And I want to just underscore the importance of primary balance. Look, first of all, primary balance measures your fiscal health, or it is an anchor upon which you get enough space to do other things.
Yeah.
For example, when you take your domestic revenue, that's why I started by the fact that we must be very measured as to what is coming from Ghanaians. When you take your total domestic revenue and you take your total domestic expenditure minus interest payment, the rest, if it is positive, it simply suggests that you don't need to borrow. If it is negative, it means that you need to borrow to finance that deficit. And that is why Ghana, over the last few decades, has always been accumulating debt, because we need to always finance our primary deficits. Look, Doc, the reason that occasioned the MPP primary surplus in 2017, 2018, 2019 was not because of performance. It was reclassification of expenditure. If you remember, they introduced the concept of below the line and above the line.
Yeah.
So certain key government expenditures were taken off and given to the SOEs. So to free the government of enough revenue. So it means that government gave SOEs that as if it is their own, and they must refinance it through their balance sheets, so that the central government will be free of them and get smaller expenditure. Unlike the previous regimes, we never had that concept of below and above the line. So it must be clear from onset. So if you look at the primary balance, IMF projected, due to the level of debt that they found Ghana post-COVID, they suggested that we must do a primary balance of surplus of 0.5% of GDP, meaning that we don't need to borrow more. The government did deficit of 3.9%, above a surplus of 0.5%. The net effect is that we had done negative 4.4%. Because if they want you to do positive of 0.5, you are doing negative of 3.9. It means that you've reversed by negative 4.4%. And then the overall overall deficit was 7.9. We don't use the overall. You know why? Because some of those things will be previous accumulations, not related to that year. So that's why our interest is on the primary deficit. Number 2, you look at inflation. I remember President Mahama was castigated seriously in 2016 that inflation was around 15%. So the only expectation that we were having was that after 8 years, we should have seen an inflation level lower than what you took, because you promised to do better. For example, we promised to do better in the next 4 years. So if in 4 years' time you are assessing the health of the economy, at least it should be better than what we inherited in 2024. So we were expecting that inflation would be something less than 15%. In fact, in the 1992 Constitution, when we started the Fourth Republic, It was only in 2022 we had an inflation rate of 54%. It never happened. And it came down to 23.8% against an IMF projection of 18%. And then when you come to the debt stock, and that's why let me get little time to do some education here. The MPP are always quick, and they are funny when they are doing the rate of debt accumulations. Who has accumulated more debt than who? First of all, Ghana has a functional currency of Ghana cedis. We don't have any other functional currency. IS 21 will tell you how to classify liabilities, debt, and all those things in your functional currency. So our functional currency is the cedi. So this whole voodoo calculation that they always do with, oh, we have added 40, the MDC did $42 billion, we are doing 21 billion. No, it is not permissible. You know why? Because you must always know your base. In 2016, if you had converted that amount you are using in dollar now to the 420 pesos, it will not be the same as converting the same dollar with a larger denominator of 16 Ghana cedis. It is as a result of recklessness and fiscal indiscipline that occasioned your exchange rate to depreciate from 4 cedis to 16 Ghana cedis. And you are happy deflating your external debt by dividing it over the higher exchange rate. We don't do mathematics like that. We should use pound for pound. If you are using in dollar terms, we should all convert at either 16 or we all convert at 4 cedi 20 pesos. But you don't take somebody who owns with a smaller denominator of 4.2 and yours with a higher denominator of 16 Ghana cedis. That is not mathematics. Number 3, when you look, they also do debt accumulation in terms of percentage. That President Kufuor left a debt of 9.5 billion. We move it to 122 billion. That is over 1,000%. But one thing that they forget is that you can never say that when you take 9.5 billion out of 122, you get a figure higher than taking 726 billion from 122. You can never argue that. So they are quick to hide behind percentage and then dollar terms. But they don't face the reality. Because when you are going to pay the debt, you don't pay it with the percentage. You don't also pay it with the forex. It is the Ghana cedi that you convert to go and pay that debt. But even talking about public debt, for this time round, we have followed their metrics of always decoupling SOE's debt from our public debt. Apart from the 726 billion, look at our SOEs. I'm happy he said Dr. Randy can do restructuring in the cocoa. In fact, this morning we are considering a bill from Cocoa Board as to how to re-engineer the financing structure. Look, Cocoa Board alone has 32 billion Ghana cedis.
Sitting on their books.
Sitting on their books. And not only that, this year, any ton of cocoa that we do will suffer $4,000 loss. Because of last year, the syndicated loan that we took from the market and said we want to buy cocoa, we didn't get enough. So people had given us money expecting cocoa beans, we didn't supply. Now cocoa price has gone up. The differential, we must take care of it. Look at ECG. You left the lights on, yet saddled with debt. Look, but for the renegotiation that was done by the Energy Ministry and the President in the meeting, IPPs alone were owed $1.73 billion. Ghana would have been back to Dumso. Look at our banking sector. It is always nauseating when I'm talking about that. Because Ghana had 67% local participation in the banking industry. Currently, how many indigenous banks do we have in our banking industry? Yet, yesterday I showed it to the former Deputy Finance Minister, Abena, the asset quality review that was done. They projected the total deposits amount in those suffering banks at 9 billion. So if you come as a government and you pick the report, the IMF has already indicated based on the fiscal health of those banks, and they enumerated those banks to you. So if you come and they need 9 billion recapitalization, all you need to do, recapitalize and change the governance structure. Because one, misuse of the deposited fund, that's the issue. Is that not it? Those people at the helm of affairs, restructure it. Or you consolidate like you did. But they came, what did they do? They collapsed all those banks. People went for panic withdrawals. Banks had made investments. They couldn't honor their depositors' requirements. Then, government of Ghana, through the taxpayer, has paid a total of 30.3 billion Ghana cedis. Yet this year alone, the IMF reports that we have only done 93% of the shock that came as a result of the cleanup. We still need 10.3 billion Ghana cedis to solve it. ADB and NIB that was established for commercial viability and to drive agriculture need about 2.2 billion Ghana cedis recapitalization to function according to the dictates of its establishment. Then you look at the real sector that they talk about. They were happy. I've already talked about I don't think growth of 5%. Look, let's be honest. They said they grew at 5.7%, yet we said we are resetting the country. Why are we growing at 4.4%? That is the disingenuity of the NPP, and that's my problem. Look,
you don't think it's a legitimate
it's not
question?
legitimate,
Why?
and I'll tell you why. First of all, if you are a finance minister, you have 5 weeks to prepare a budget. 5 weeks. How can you use 5 weeks in the first place to do a complete forecast in 5 weeks? Number two, their own document, the 3 months budget that they prepared for us upon assumption of office, they projected that Ghana will grow at 4% for 2025. The finance minister didn't do any voodoo calculation. He only uplifted the IMF projection of 4%. Number two, these same people in 2024 beginning projected Ghana will grow at 2.8%. Mid-year, they revised it to 3.1%. Yet they ended the year with 5.7%. So where is the basis when you project less and do more? Where is the basis? You projected to grow at 2.8, revised it to 3.1, yet you ended the year with 5.7%. So there's nothing wrong with projecting low and doing more. That is the available data that you have.
But from where you sit, what do you think would account for the low GDP growth?
Thank you.
Projected GDP growth.
Thank you. If you look at currently, we have a lot of government commitments that we need to do.
Okay.
Unlike the previous regime, that there was complete debt suspension. This year, we are expected to pay 67 billion Ghana cedis in terms of domestic and external debt. They were not paying for 3 consecutive years. So, when we are doing our macro targets or the medium-term targets to be modest, it doesn't reflect incompetence. Then the last one in the external sector, they said, in fact, we all know $1 to 4 cedi traded pesos can never be better than $1 to 15 cedis. It can never be. Exchange rate stability is not only good for the government, it's also good for the private sector for planning. I can tell you, 13% rise in our debt accumulation is not as a result of the fact that NPP borrowed more. It is exchange rate differentials. When they want to pay, the dollar has increased. They have to look for the additional money to pay. So, let's not celebrate this level of poor performance. When you are leaving an office after 8 years, you criticize President Mahama managing the exchange rate at 4 cedi, 20 pesos to $1. You said he was incompetent. You gave him all sort of names. Yet you ended the 8-year mandate with 15.5 Ghana cedis to $1.